Okay, welcome everyone to Video Everywhere, Technologies and Platforms Enabling the Next Generation of Over-the-Top TV. And we're going to start the discussion by going down the line here, and each of the panelists will introduce him or herself, talk a little bit about their company, how they fit into the video ecosystem, and what they personally do. So let's start with Alex.
Hi there, my name is Alex Drosen. I run the North American operations for a company called Massive. We've been around for about 20 years. We have offices throughout the world. And I guess we're focused on the intersection of platform app development meets UI, UX.
All right. I'm Judy Johnson. I'm Director of Product and Delivery at Bottle Rocket for their All Product division. All is a product that delivers highly rated user experiences on mobile and connected devices, specifically like iPhone, iPad, Android tablets, Android phones, and connected devices such as Roku and Apple TV. And we do this in such a way that we keep our brands so they have their own identities. We're not cookie cutters, so you're able to look like your brand. You're able to express yourself. We do this also so that we integrate in the core technologies such as authentication, ad delivery, capturing of the right analytics, so the business proposition, not just the user experience behind it. Prior to this, real quick, some of our brands that we have, they have two business models. One's TV Everywhere, so that includes brands like NBC, USA, Sci-Fi, Travel Channel, Oprah Network, Fuse, and then we have some brands that also have a direct-to-consumer model. People like Awesomeness TV or, oh wow, my brain just went blank, or Tastemade. So prior to that, I was director of product management for Sony, delivering their global video services on the PlayStation Network. So I've had the privilege of working both sides, being able to deliver a product platform for other brands or bring a brand ourselves delivering our own product platform.
Great. Josette.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Josette Bond. I'm currently the Chief Strategy Officer and Head of Research at the CTM, which stands for Institute for Communication Technology Management at USC. What we do there is develop a slate of digital media research programs for the benefits of our key sponsors, and those are large telecommunications companies like AT&T, Verizon, BT, technology giants like Ericsson, Nokia, Cisco, as well as the Hollywood studios. So it's quite an interesting bunch. And working with those sponsors allows us to basically look at subject matters from all their angles, not just from the standpoint of content providers, for instance. So among the programs that I oversee is one on all aspects of the digital home, one on mobile life that looks at handset usage, service adoptions, etc., as well as Internet of Things, which we started last year, and more importantly to the subject matter of this panel, a program currently in its third year that deals with the future of media. So this year, the future of media is all about the growth of mobile video. So I hope to share some of those insights as required by the questions that Jonathan may pose in the context of this panel. And in terms of my background, I'm not at all an academic by background. I've spent the last 30 years of my life working in executive positions either in entertainment, telecom, or technology. Thank you.
Great. And Xavier.
Hi, everybody. My name is Xavier Kochar. I am the founder of the Video Genome Project. The Video Genome Project is a structured data company that has gone out and tapped into deep metadata across the collective, really any open digital ecosystems like the open web. Basically, we wanted to gain a deep understanding of all of video, and we thought we would leverage the world because the world is actually sharing a lot about video beyond just platforms, social media platforms, but really across the connected web. And so we developed some smart tools and technologies that went out and aggregated deep metadata across the world for all video in real time. And essentially, in a pretty short amount of time, we became the world's largest structured database of video content metadata, and in essence became a self-populating Wikipedia. And so now we use that to to put together curation tools for OTT providers, MVPDs, even CE, really just broadly anyone who's distributing video to users.
Great. And I'm Jonathan Hurd, Director with Altman Valandri and Company. We're a 120-person strategy consulting firm focused on technology, media, telecom. Offices in Boston, New York, San Francisco, but we cover North America. And we also have a European partner firm called Solon. So let's start with the consumer experience. Where originally OTT video years ago now was all about getting it to work, the technology of it, and largely that's been solved. But there were still plenty of consumer pain points associated with unmanaged video, over-the-top video. In other words, video delivered over the public internet. What do you see as the major pain points for consumers today? Josette, any one of you?
Well, I'll start.
I'm going to cold call you. Next question.
I'll start. So you're right, Jonathan, that even as recently as I'd say 5 years ago or even 3 years ago, we had a lot of issues around delivery. Just fiber to the homes, latency. By and large, a lot of that has been solved or is being solved. So totally agree with you that delivery is, we're sort of there. One of the things that I think is a big issue for users, for consumers, is really the barriers to entry to create any sort of video. I mean, anyone can create video today, and it's really interesting because, and we'll probably talk about this a little later as far as business models, but video is still priced based on impressions, and so oftentimes cheaper to produce video, cheaper to share and distribute video. Can get just the same amount of views, impressions as kind of expensive video, which is why, you see sort of this, kind of like the BuzzFeedification of video, right? And it's because it's higher ROI to produce and distribute cheaper video. Now, because of that, everyone's creating video, and particularly on these OTT platforms, there's just a lot of video to be had and to be found. But still, if you track most of usage, depending on what the platform is, whether it's Netflix or an OTT, like a newer OTT platform, it's not even like 80-20 as far as the volume of video versus what the usage is. It's like 99-1. So the top titles, the top brands still get a lot of most of the usage. It's why I'll bet, even though right now, if most of us are on Netflix, I'll bet most of our queues look very, very similar, even though Netflix has about 70,000 titles at any one time. So I think potentially a pretty big issue for consumers is, great, we have access to almost any video there is that exists, and yet we're still kind of going to watching the same thing. So it's sort of a discovery issue. I mean, there's like 4 or 5 big issues. I'm not going to say all of them. I'll just say like discovery is probably one of the big consumer issues right now. Slightly self-serving because our company has solved the discovery problem, but I'm sure these guys will give some self-serving answers too.
This is not necessarily a self-serving answer, but it has to do with just one aspect of this, because the question is huge, and I think this is why we had some hesitancy in starting to broach it.
Right.
So first of all, OTT, what are we talking about? I mean, if we're talking about strictly the OTT video services such as Netflix, Hulu, etc., YouTube, then that's one set of answers. But if we also include TV everywhere, it might be another set of answers. So basically, everyone talks about, like, there's a humongous amount of content everywhere. Well, I'd like to take a slightly different viewpoint on that. There is there is a tremendous amount of content, but there's not necessarily the content that you want to watch. So I mean that's a big deal, and that's a huge pain point right there, and for reasons that are inherent often to the licensing deals that are in the back of that, including a number of holdbacks that are more and more popular for high value content. So TV everywhere, for instance, as has been said at this conference quite a bit, is far from being everywhere. If you look at Comcast, Xfinity, Go, for instance, well, it's only everywhere in the confines of your home Wi-Fi network, and that is a broken equation right there, right? So I see that with the gentleman from Dish Network is here. I mean, with Dish, you really need a DVR whistling in order to have to be able to extend your experience. I mean, it's not unsurmountable, but it is okay. Okay, you can correct me later, but I mean, okay. So, I mean, we have issues of that type, and if you extend the experience over mobiles, then you have other issues, no less of which is the ads that don't load well, okay, over mobiles and prevent access to the experience. Okay, so I'm not going to monopolize the conversation about that because it might touch upon other questions Jonathan may have about business models, but the business models themselves sometimes are a pain point.
And I'm just going to kind of expand on your answer. One of the things that we find is it's not just discovery. It's the content is located in so many places, and it's very difficult to know. So, for instance, I watch the show on Sci-Fi, and I love it. And I watch it on TV, but I don't always necessarily know that it's sci-fi content I'm watching or what brand or that I want to go look at. It's being able to find. And right now, there are so many ways to get to the same content, but there's also so many different windows for contents. And when they come out and when they're available on this one system versus this one system, or over here I can cast it and over here I can't, or it's on my Roku over here. And I think this thing of video everywhere, right now what we have is pockets of video available in multiple places, but we really don't have video everywhere yet.
Right.
We don't really have the way to watch whatever I want, whenever I want, however I want. And I think that's the expectation consumers have, that we haven't made it to that point yet.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I think the consumers are getting the benefit of all these commercial models that we're having to work through now. I mean, the exciting part, I think, from Massive's perspective is, especially in the U.S. right now, the North American marketplace, what we're doing is heavily focused on the SVOD model. So we're not as focused on an AVOD model, but it's TVOD, it's SVOD. And out of the subscription services, what we're focused on is bringing efficiency to that model. So what we typically see in our telco conversations or our broadcaster conversations or somebody who owns content is typically a very inefficient stack, which means multiple vendors, a lot of headaches, inefficiency of the way technology is talking to each other. And then when you add on the areas that Judy and I focus on, which is the UI UX piece, which is bring relevancy from a front end perspective, and a freshness, which really doesn't exist in most of these applications that you open up. I went to CISO this morning. I was like, just a little bit disappointed that on my iPhone it's such a fixed environment. There's very little flexibility. And when it comes to catalog and distribution, most of our clients, even the big ones, are rotating smaller catalogs now because of distribution restrictions. And what's exciting is bringing efficiency to that model. So where data comes in, that's exciting too, because data ultimately is going to drive what I think is a highly automated process in this OTT ecosystem. And we all throw out this terminology, but it's all overused in many different ways. But my point being that data is driving, I think, technology that has improved dramatically over the last couple of years. But I think the area which excites me most is really how the front end is working with the back end and obviously the middleware. So.
Now, when you say a more automated process, are you referring to that from a consumer perspective or from an automated process of getting the video out there?
I probably should elaborate on that. I think when I'm talking about automation, I'm talking about bringing probably efficiency to a commercial model. So the beauty is in a geographic area, somebody who is not just distributing in the US and around the world will come in and they'll see that there's engagement on an Android-based device. They're seeing it on Xbox, they're seeing it on a Roku, and they're really trying to figure out how to optimize that correctly. And that can be done, and it can be refreshed in different ways. You can now program ahead of time. So I'm really talking about the excitement that data can bring ultimately to the commercial model, and we're seeing that in real time now. Obviously, the humans are still behind it, but
Right.
it's with great help from data.
But it sounds like that, that data can also bring a level of personalization that assists with discovery as well, like making suggestions that are, whether it's platform specific.
Yeah, those
because of the
recommendations can
rights, et
happen in
cetera.
real time, which is the great thing. And the point is, those real-time recommendations can affect the way the front end is actually showcased. Yeah.
Good. Judy, how important is video quality in all of this? Is it, and how much does it outweigh other factors, would you say?
So that's an interesting question. I happened to read something this morning that 76% of people that view mobile video said it was good enough. They compared it to their television quality and they said it was as good or better. All of us in this room know that that's probably not true based on their bandwidth, their capabilities, what they're looking at, but it's perceived that way to the user. So I come from a world that, at Sony, we had beautiful televisions and 4K capability, and quality was so important, and you wouldn't go out with anything that, we were looking for the blocking of everything. But the users today that are watching it on this device, they're fine with what they're seeing. And I think it really depends on where the users are consuming their device, because I think you also have a different opinion if you're trying to watch the same video on Apple TV. All of a sudden it's on your 65-inch television, and you have a different expectation of what you're looking for or what you consider good quality. But I think if you look at it and say who's your market and who you're targeting this for and what are your users and what devices they're consuming it, for the most part, I think we've got good quality for what users are wanting to watch right now. I still expect it to get better. I still expect, like I said, for those of us with 4K televisions, we love that experience. But I think for what the consumers are willing to expect and their happiness and satisfaction, we are at a good point right now.
Yeah, just to piggyback on your remarks, so we carry out a lot of primary consumer research with North American consumers across demographics, and we pose that question regularly, what is the importance of, the video quality and the sound quality, especially with regard to mobiles. And we got, in our last round of primary research, the very, very clear answer that what was of paramount importance, especially for mobiles, was the quality of the experience in terms of the reliability of the signal, that the content should absolutely not buffer, right? And that there ought to be breadth and depth of content, but video quality was like fourth or fifth down the line in terms of criteria for adoption of services over mobiles or continuation of TV everywhere watching over mobiles.
Point. In terms of the consumer experience and over-the-top video versus traditional, what are your thoughts on cannibalization of traditional TV viewing versus stimulation of traditional TV? And clearly, every year we have, another % or so when you look at household adoption of traditional pay TV services, another % decline. The base is staying relatively the same because households are growing at about 1% a year. But, in terms of OTT, do you see it cannibalizing? Do you see some of these new services actually taking away, or is it more complementary?
I personally think it's complementary, and it's becoming more of a necessity, I think, for the large cable companies, telcos to offer it up. I mean, it's an expectation, I think, as part of your monthly package now. So I think what's interesting is to see how they're repackaging now. So it's now, how does technology bring efficiency to repackaging programming or distribution rights that you have in your current catalog? So, we're all looking at Hulu nowadays, and they've gone out and, now they have some live channel, discussions, and they want to incorporate that with some original programming. What's interesting is, I think what's more important actually is that now there's more efficiency in the technology to get a true spectrum of opportunity across different devices out there. And a lot of the conversation really revolves around how do you build one platform and how do you then actually push that out to all the devices that you have in marketplace. Most of the conversations that we have with large telcos and with media companies are, I want speed to market, but I want an efficient template to get it out there with, but we want to be able to market correctly to all these different devices. And then we want to be able to pivot possibly in real time, so we want to be able to move from an AVOD to an SVOD when the timing comes around. Or within an SVOD, if it doesn't work, do we have the ability to reuse that technology and change it from, it could be a horror channel to a kids channel. It doesn't really matter what the content is. The point is that I think up to now we have spent a huge amount of time making mistakes with respect to how technology can be reused. And so we're quite proud of Massive to, we spent a huge amount of time developing enough of a code base that ultimately you don't need to start from scratch every time. And as opposed to going back to your vendor and saying, I need a new app and I need to spend another X, amount of money, it's now about, okay, we've pivoted our commercial model and here's how we're going to reuse the technology to take it that one step further.
When you were saying, if the SVOD service doesn't work, you meant from not enough people subscribe to it, or it actually technically doesn't work?
No, not technically. I mean, I'm talking about a service that obviously works, but what I'm talking about is how do you engage? What do you have to do? What is the flexibility around the template that ultimately allows you to add feature sets quite easily, or third-party vendors into that ecosystem to then push it out to the public to hopefully increase engagement? Because I think there's going to be, look, everybody's excited about the SVOD business now. Some people can afford it, some people can't. But the point is that there will be consolidation in the next, 3 to 5 years. And again, it's a question of people wanting to get out in the marketplace, taking market share, and really trying to blanket it, creating a brand, creating some true appeal around that product itself.
I'd like to add a few comments specific to your question, Jonathan. So there too, we have actually carried out surveys that pose these very specific questions, right? And especially with the millennials. The older millennials that are aged 25 to 34 are a generation that the industry as a whole is watching very, very carefully right now, whether it be telecom operators, MVPDs, or content companies. And those guys are telling us loud and clear, we actually discover new shows watching OTTs that we're a lot more likely to go and find again over broadcast television afterwards. So there is actually a pull coming from OTT back into traditional media, which is an interesting trend that is worth noting. Another trend that is worth noting is that TV Everywhere, which, as you know, is the extension of the MVPD offer across multiple devices on your own time, etc. So anyway, TV Everywhere over mobiles, far from cannibalizing TV in a traditional standpoint, is actually a cornerstone of an MVPD. An MVPD strategy is what our millennials are telling us, and they're telling us that without that we absolutely would not subscribe to MVPDs. I mean, our relationship is tenuous as it is, but that's the one reason that keeps us there, is that we are in particular able to watch those shows over mobile devices. So there is actually a solidarity between those platforms, which is very encouraging for the traditional players.
It's interesting, research with millennials that we've done is supports that. So we asked about, are you aware of, does your cable provider, cable broadly, MVPD, offer TV everywhere? And awareness is very low. It's maybe high 30% across all age ranges. But millennials say that, if my cable provider offered TV everywhere, these are the ones that don't think their provider offers it, about half of them said, I'd be more likely to continue subscribing, or I'd be likely to use it monthly. It was about the same 50%. And of millennials who don't subscribe to cable TV, if a cable TV operator offered TV everywhere, about half of them said, I'd consider subscribing to cable if I could watch on devices other than a TV. So for millennials especially, it's a missed opportunity.
Yeah, I'll offer a perspective. It'll be contrarian, not just not just to be contrarian, but I actually believe it. So I think it is cannibalizing, and I think the MVPDs know it. And the reason I know, by the way, this does not take away from either of these studies. This does not take away from the fact that see, it's interesting. Both of you guys said that the OTT offering supports the set-top box or the traditional service provider offering, but not the other way around. So the MVPDs are recognizing that it's moving towards that. And by the way, you know how you can tell? Like, don't read people's lips, watch their feet. Everybody has an OTT offering, or is actually deploying one this year, or already has deployed one to various degrees of success. I mean, literally everyone. Comcast, Time Warner, CE companies, Samsung. Everybody has an OTT offering. I think this is because everyone recognizes that the actual technical platform doesn't matter, or it doesn't matter.
It's a new distribution platform, similar to the way cable was new.
It is,
for
well,
broadcast
what happened was
versus
you had these silos of tech stacks, or of technology platforms that were built, right? And now they're all sort of meeting in the middle, and the tech that's meeting them in the middle is over the top, right? Over the top works on your smartphone, it works on your device, your tablet, you name it. And so everyone is recognizing that we've got to go in that direction anyway. So I actually think it is, and by the way, it totally makes sense that millennials who are less tethered to any one platform, if you're not a millennial or you're a baby boomer or Gen X, you kind of go, oh, what's on TV? And you're at the behest of your set-top box. Millennials don't care. So what's the technology that allows all of these platforms to sort of transcend whatever their existing technology is? And that's why I actually think it's really, really interesting. And we have the good fortune of kind of working with many of these companies across the value chain, because if you have an OTT offering, then you need curation tools and what have you. So I've actually seen many of the OTT offerings, and they all kind of look the same. They're generally the same, maybe different content rights, maybe, and it's going to be interesting to see. There's like a mad rush to who owns that, who owns, I don't want to say the living room, but who owns that consumer experience. So I actually do think that it will eventually cannibalize. The thing that the fiber has, the cable and satellite operators have, is ironically what you guys just talked about that you said was not a big deal, which is quality. I mean, still the quality, and I do think quality is very, whether or not you care about quality is absolutely contextual. If you're riding the train, it's pretty cool if you're fine if it's not, 4K, right? But if you are having a Super Bowl party, I'll bet quality matters, even if it is over the top. And so I kind of feel like it will. I mean, there's even a little bit of me that feels that perhaps these like all the hardware is going to become, the CE companies, they make nothing on the hardware, right? And they're all now getting in the software business because the margins are so thin. So I sort of feel like maybe the hardware is just going to end up being dummy terminals pretty soon. So we'll see. I don't know, maybe that's contrarian. The Dish guy's like, nope, that's not what's happening at all. No.
I'm going to bring it back to the middle real quick then.
Okay, the middle.
Yeah,
What's
I'm
that?
going to bring it to the middle ground.
All right.
I think it has more to do with content itself and finding what you want to watch. And I'll just relate, like when I was younger, it was a big deal if you could get a TV in your bedroom set, right? Because it gave you freedom to watch what you wanted. Well, our millennial generation doesn't have that anymore. They have a tablet in their bedroom. They have a phone in their bedroom. And so they pick up the content they can find, and that's going to drive what they want. And I think the availability of content, and probably another poor way of looking at this is, yes, did MMA affect boxing? You bet, because it was the content people wanted to watch, right? So all of a sudden people are driving to that. And I think if there is content that people want to watch that's available for your way, they will find it, but it's going to be making sure those offerings are good too, not just the technology you're putting it on.
Good.
So I'll play peacemaker.
Yeah.
That works.
Oh, I didn't know we were in a battle.
Good. Let's talk about devices. We started to talk about that, and Judy raised a good point that it's, while the content that's available drives a lot of viewing, it's not equally available on all devices due to the way content rights are negotiated. So let's talk about that question of cannibalization. I know, Josette, you have some thoughts on this about consumption of video on mobile devices. Does that enhance or cannibalize traditional viewing?
Okay, as I think I mentioned before, in the context of TV everywhere, it certainly does enhance traditional viewing, and it's an absolute must to be deployed over mobiles, especially over smartphones, okay, and obviously tablets by extension. So yeah, so it doesn't. It really enhances the experience, okay. We are anyway engaged in a battle for people's time, but if we don't meet the new generation's way of consuming media, then we will lose their time also. So it's actually a no-brainer. Now, in terms of who consumes the most of content over mobile platforms, so we've isolated 5 different types of demographics, and this is across the board, so bear with me. So the millennials that are aged 25 to 34 are the ones that consume the most mobile video of all types, on their mobile devices, comprising tablets, smartphones, but also handheld game consoles. Then we definitely have seen a big surge in mobile video usage among Apple users, iOS operating systems, okay? Whether they be iPads or iPhones, definitely. The fact that you're a male predisposes you to watch a great deal more video over your mobiles. Okay, and ethnic minorities, especially African American and Hispanic minorities, consume a great deal more over mobile devices, and that includes TV everywhere. And finally, the mere fact of owning a tablet predisposes you to watch a great deal more mobile video, and that's not just over your tablet, but that habit is actually transferred over your mobile phones.
Interesting. And Judy, I think you had talked about how you can use mobile as part of a differentiated experience. So one of the things Xavier said was how all of these services tend to look alike. And that's pretty disturbing if you're marketing something, that if it's not differentiated in some way, you're just going to end up in a bloodbath. So what are the opportunities for differentiating, actually, whether it's using mobile or anything else in the customer experience?
For most people, it's like, to differentiate, you really have to, the same reason you have a brand. I'm take a step back. When you have a brand, each brand has their own identity, their own look, their own feel. It's really driven by their content. If you go to a channel, if I go to Animal Planet, I know what I'm going to get. If I go to ESPN, I know what I get. It's all about my brand and my content. It's making sure those mobile experiences aren't cookie cutter experiences, but they allow you to enhance your brand, allow you to be able to showcase. And to me, it's still more about the content, right? For what we're talking about is people that are content owners, and so it's about their content to be able to show that through. So it's not about the chrome around it. It's not about the interaction between it. It's really about the content, and are you providing the ability for the users to get to they want and see who you are when they seek that. And so I don't think there's a lot of differentiators. I do think lots of times there are a lot of features that fit certain content. Like reality may need more social features than other type of content, or there may be features that fit certain genres better than others. There's not a one size fits all, but that's where you have to step back and kind of know who you are and who you're driving towards, and basically, once again, I'm gonna say who your content's being geared to is really how you differentiate yourself.
Yeah, it's interesting because working from a UX perspective, and then the traditional model with a lot of companies that we encounter is they want to go to market, they think their TV everywhere strategy is iOS and Android, and it sort of stops there. And then they go, all right, we're talking to a design agency, and we've got this great piece of design that we're now going to bolt on to our piece of technology. It simply doesn't work. And there was such frustration around this whole discussion around how to get that together and how to make it work. what we've tried to do is to bring both of those worlds together to bring efficiency to that conversation. So ultimately, when you're upgrading one template or any templates that you're actually using as part of our catalog, it can immediately push to an ecosystem. So the whole point is you don't have to go through this horrible process of calling up your vendor, saying, here's a change request, you go through a back and forth on an SOW. It's time consuming and it's dollar wasting. And so what I think is exciting about what's happening right now is, we can pull from all these third-party vendors, but it's still interesting to see that the content holder, the most important thing for them is basic feature sets, getting to market, and then creating a more bespoke approach once they're in market, because there's such a race to get into market right now, and the competition is so fierce. So that's at least what we're seeing from our perspective is get into market, then they will spend extra money typically to create a highly bespoke, customized, templatized approach. And we keep building, we keep iterating. So ultimately, we work with manufacturers 9 months ahead of time so that our customers don't have the typical headaches of another version's come around, what are we going to do with it? That goes into our centralized platform and it gets pushed up across all the devices. And so it's a much more efficient way of thinking of marketing to a customer ultimately.
Okay. Well, for any of you, what are some examples? Judy, you're talking about the service fitting the brand, or Alex, someone who's got something in the market, then they come up with a more custom experience. Any case study examples that you can name that come to mind where there's differentiation in that way? I'll throw one.
Well, I can name some, but
Good.
I just want to let
Yeah.
Judy if you want. I don't know if you want.
Go ahead, I'm trying to decipher the question.
Well, I'll just give an
Oh,
example. One of our customers is one of the Netflixes in Canada. So there's Show Me in Canada, there's Crave TV, which we built basically in conjunction with some other vendors. But they came to us and they said, we need to get to market quickly. We need a templatized approach. We like the way you can build across many platforms at once. So we took them to market very, very quickly. And then over a period of 2 years, what we've done is gradually the experience is going to be changing the way it actually pushes and markets to their subscribers. And so that is about iterating with an active team. We have retained teams that work with these large telcos. And it just means that they can throw whatever you want at us as a company, but there's always efficiency because everybody knows that when you go out there and you start driving your own commercial models and negotiating with Samsung and negotiating with X, Y, and Z device manufacturer, there are hurdles that take place. So the reality is if you're really looking at a wide spectrum of a true TV Everywhere approach across all these platforms, it's much more efficient to work with a retained team and actually deploy as soon as you have the OKs and the green lights. In the interim, we work on specific marketing, pieces and deployments that get tied into the front-end UI.
So,
I'm going to expand
go
on that
ahead.
just a second, because I think I would come back to we work with a lot of different brands. We have everybody from Awesomeness TV. If you're familiar with Awesomeness TV, it's probably for 13 to maybe 18-year-old girls. And then we have MSNBC, which is an entirely different, they don't really care about anything the 13 to 18-year-old girls care about. And we have HGTV. They all have very different models. A good example is House Hunters. As you know, House Hunters, there are 32 million episodes of House Hunters. They're easy to produce, they're very quick to get out there, they're not episodic. There's not season 1, episode 1, season 1, episode 2. They're just House Hunters. And they don't really want to differentiate by seasons. They don't even have a concept of seasons. And so when you say, how do you differentiate in the marketplace, it's really, how do you have a solution that doesn't force you into models that are very stagnant, doesn't force you into, I've got to have a season 1, episode 1, or a season 1, episode 2. Or I have to be driven this way that maybe 13 to 18-year-old girls, they're a little bit more scattered in how they're thinking, or they have more topic-based instead of more event-based. And it's how do you make solutions that fit the market and the content that you're trying to drive, more than how do you have that one unique feature that differentiates you.
So it's an interesting point, and I was thinking while you're describing that, the opposite of HBO Go, where that almost everything is episodic or serialized, right? And you don't want to watch an episode that might be a spoiler for prior ones. So they make that easy because every single episode of everything they've ever done is available there. So that, but on the other hand, what does that say about the user experience as well, right? In other words, if I'm on my cable operator's guide with VOD, et cetera, and I'm in the realm of House Hunters, it should be a fairly different experience than if I'm watching something on HBO, right? Is that?
It should be a different experience, because what they don't want to necessarily do is always start you with the latest episode first, like HBO, or the reverse of that, and start at the end. It's how do I give you a mix of this content that may be focused more on, the type of areas that you're looking at in House Hunters, not necessarily the time that you're looking at it, because they do span. There is no rhyme or reason why you would want to look at the first thing ever produced, and then the second, and then the third in this model, when there are other areas of the content. And then it's also difficult to recommend things, right? I mean, there's not necessarily a relationship between episode 1, episode 5, episode 7, but what are the ones that they may feel are like this has been more highly rated, more popular? How do I promote this content to you? Which is very easy in HBO Go. I'm going to promote the latest episode, and so it is a different model to create that experience.
With localization, that would be House Hunter customization,
Yeah.
if you happen to be looking at a specific geographical area.
Exactly.
Yeah, the thing I see as a possible paradox or challenge, let's say, with the user experience is that in the research we've done, even millennials, 80% plus of millennials say that they prefer a single app from their cable TV provider versus separate apps for every single channel. So, how going forward do we reconcile that? Clearly, it doesn't work if you're navigating across 20 apps, all with very different experiences. How do you discover things? How do you manage those different and cope with those different user experiences? But then, on the other hand, even if you put everything in one place, you don't want a cookie cutter approach necessarily, right? By
You
brand.
don't, but let's say you're HDTV, and you go, right now I don't have any relationship with my customers, right? It's all managed through the MVPD. They have the relationship, I provide the content. I don't have a lot of analytics on what's being watched. There's a lot of reason for me to want to have my brand experience. There's things I want to provide to you. But you're right, as a consumer, I don't want to open 25 different apps. And I actually see that we see things like iOS 9 with their Spotlight search being able to provide some more capabilities around this to be able to find content, to be able to look at it. But this is, to me, is one of those consumer pain points of being able to find what you want to watch on all of these different ecosystems.
Yeah, I mean, but I do think each brand, as a standalone business, needs to remain independent for exactly those reasons to a degree. I mean, everybody wants their own data, everybody has their own brand, everybody has their own ecosystem. What I think is smart now is that companies like, so Starz built their own, app, and they recently came out with, their new app. What's smart is, what I love that what they did was they built it as a platform. So ultimately, again, they're reusing the templates, the technology across other areas that they're interested in, building other SVOD services as part of. So I think you'll find consolidation within ecosystems as long as they're within parent company ecosystems. The cross-blending of that is probably pretty difficult just because of distribution rights. So I don't see that happening in the near future, at least.
Yeah, there's another problem too, is that more and more the shows are the brands themselves and not the companies that produce them, right?
Yep.
And since those shows are available concurrently on Netflix, albeit not necessarily the same seasons as they are on your MVPD, then the allegiance there is again challenged. Okay, so are we, what are we faithful to? A show, in which case we're pursuing the show wherever it is, or are we faithful to Comcast or Dish Network?
I would say we're more faithful to a show now, and what we're seeing is what they're doing, and the brands are doing, is ultimately with specific shows building their own ecosystems, adding extra components, whether those are mini live components or catch-up components that can be integrated, the social pieces. How do you create a community ultimately around these shows themselves. And that's super interesting because that's where you can start making a difference ultimately, I think. And, technology has not allowed that in the past years because it's been so expensive to do so. But now, with the proliferation, obviously, of choices in the marketplace, but more thought being put around the systems integration pieces and ultimately consolidation, I think, in the marketplace, at least this is moving forward in a positive fashion, I would say.
Let's see. So much good stuff. I actually think user experience, I think like anything else, there's a fragmentation and then a consolidation and then a fragmentation, consolidation. We are in a period of ridiculous OTT buildup. And what will end up happening is these respective OTT, let's not call them platforms, let's call them OTT services, will start aggregating users, some that will be extremely verticalized and niched, think like the Crunchyrolls of the world. That's a very niche audience. Others that will become more generalized and mainstream. We'll see. We'll see. Is it going to be Time Warner or Comcast, or is it going to be or Samsung's? Call that more like a general market OTT service. And eventually, there's going to be consolidation. I believe we're just in a period now that's going to last, I don't know, a couple of years, maybe several years, until. By the way, OTT services are extremely expensive to put on. I mean, they're just these are mostly all. I would say loss leaders, but I'm not sure there's any leading going on. So eventually, they're going to either go out of business, or they're going to, the bigger fish are going to swallow the smaller fish. Once that happens, I think that coincides very well to what millennials want, millennials and Gen Zs want. One of the things that hasn't been discussed on the panel is actually currently. Looking around the room, probably nobody in the room, although you all look very young and beautiful. But maybe one guy. I see one guy, maybe 2 guys, 3 guys. But you know how millennials and Gen Zs actually curate video right now? Not the way we do it. Once they know they want to watch something, do you know where they go first? Any guesses?
I'm guessing Google.
That's it. They go to Google. They go to once they. By the way. I do that. I'm not even a millennial. I often miss the debates, and I want to watch 3 pieces of video. Okay, I want to watch. This has happened a lot. It's getting a little. Now I don't feel so bad because the next debate is just like you miss this one, you'll catch the next one. It's the same stuff. But there's 3 pieces of video that I want to watch when I come home late at night. Right? There's if it's a 2-hour debate, where it's all condensed in just 7 minutes, no commentary, just the cut, whatever. There's that piece of video. There's actually the commentary. Sometimes I actually don't mind the talking heads and what was going on for no other reason than sometimes just my own comedy. I'd love kind of maybe that CNN or Fox News or less so Fox News, but and then there's the reactions from the crowd. Okay, I will tell you, necessarily, those 3 pieces of video absolutely 100% exist. Not on one platform. In fact, I don't even know where do I go? Where do I search for that? So you know where I go. I don't go to a video content distributor, okay? I don't go to a UX company. I go to a tools company. I go to a search company, which by the way, the search company was not built for video. It was a search company that indexed the web. And so it's a kind of, even for video, it's a relatively clunky search. It's getting better, but it's relatively clunky search. And then I find those 3 pieces of video, and then I figure out what the distribution channels are that I can watch those best. And you know what? Probably those 3 pieces of video, one was on CNN, one was on YouTube, and one was on some other third place. Now, how am I supposed to? It's an extremely disjointed, clunky experience, but millennials are just doing it anyway. They're doing it anyway. And much the same way that when we were millennials, remember when we used to pirate music? No, just Josette. But the rest of us used to pay. But remember when we used to pirate music? It was happening anyway. And then a technology came, or system providers came that said, guys, they're doing it anyway. can we, like, instead of resisting it, instead of like kind of saying that these are closed platforms, let's just give them the tools to enhance it. And by the way, they'll probably pay for it, and they did. And so I actually think that I agree with what was said by Judy as far as, or maybe it was Jonathan, I don't know, about like why is the experience is kind of different, right? Like maybe it should be different. The consumption, the curation experience when you're buying when you're consuming the House Hunter shows. I didn't even know that 32 million episodes. It's crazy.
No.
Billion.
What?
Billion, no.
No. So, but this actually. So, and we think about in our company. We think about like, because we're a curation company, and we think about curation across other categories, and we have such a unique phenomenon in our category. Film and video, film and TV. It used to be film and TV when I started, and that is, it's both a film and TV used to be extremely dependent on format, and there used to be just a handful of big brands, like maybe 100 big brands. Okay, that our industry has been built on that. Okay, just a handful of big brands. That's unlike like the restaurant industry. Right, unlike like Yelp, what Yelp does, or unlike a lot of other other industries, it's just these big brands. And then all of a sudden, like in the last 10 years, it wasn't just a handful of big brands, but where the hell did this like long tail come from? It just like came overnight. So we have these legacy business models, we have these legacy distribution systems, our legacy our UXs and UIs are all sort of built to find best the Game of Thrones and the Walking Deads of the world. And that experience, both from a tool standpoint and a user standpoint, that's like, think about that experience versus think about 32 million episodes, like, and finding that even feels different. This feels more like this should be sort of passive discovery, and this feels more like it should be lean forward. What exactly are you looking for, right? And unfortunately, it's on one distribution platform with one set of tools. So I think it'll. I offer no solutions there. I just highlight problems. But I think this is. I think it'll be fine because eventually there are innovative people. The business models. As much as of a pain in the ass it is to work with the direct TVs and the dishes, I just said that just for you, and like the big companies, it's okay because eventually these things will just, it will naturally, you can't like beat the consumer, right? The consumer, whatever they're naturally doing, they're going to do it. Josette or Judy said earlier that there isn't any, there's also an issue with content. The content we want to watch doesn't exist. I'm gonna take a surprise. I'm gonna take a contrarian view on that. And I'm gonna say that's actually not right at all. I think that you have to qualify that, meaning that the content does not exist within the service provider, within any one given service provider. I think at any one time, if you are in the mood to consume a certain piece of content, like I just gave that example of the debates, absolutely right. CNN cannot deliver me all the content I want, right? But all the content does exist. And that's why I think because the content is there, or pretty good proxy or substitute content is there for your mood or your time of place or context or whatever it is, I think tools will ultimately be the differentiator. Absolutely tools. That's like 1,000,000%.
And you're saying tools meaning discovery tools or search. They're different, discovery versus search, right? In one case, I don't know exactly what
I'll use the catch-all of curation, right? Like, so how do you find the right piece of video for you at any one time? And probably more important, how does the right piece of video find you at any one period of time? And so one is active, one is passive. So I'll say curation in general, because I actually think brands, should we even say content is king anymore? I mean, like, of course brands are like, the content brands are the most important thing, right? People want to watch Silicon Valley. They want to watch Veep or Walking Dead or whatever. Of course. But like let me tell you something. These studios, they're not stupid. They're selling to all the OTT providers. This is great. They're like, great. You raise venture capital. You have like a $3 billion to spend on licensing. Fantastic. We know half of you are not going to be in business in 3 years, but in the meantime, we'll take your licensing fees. So like, so they're going to the content, I think, is going to, like the Dish offering and the Time Warner offering. It's a lot of the big brands are all there, you know. And if they're not, then shame on their content licensing people for not being able to close those deals. So after that, then it's going to be discoverability or curation or all that. That's what I think.
Yeah, but there is one flaw in what you are.
Just one? Wow, that's good. Then I'm doing pretty well if there's only one.
Maybe I'm being polite. but
Only one
okay.
flaw per
Oh,
two.
wow. Excuse me.
No, there's one flaw that I see, okay, and that's just my perspective. That as you are trying to discover that content via Google, whatever you're doing, if you're a millennial, some of it might be on services that you're currently not paying for. So you discover them. You discover that they're on Netflix, or you discover they're on Hulu Plus. But does that mean you're going to subscribe on top of whatever you have now? I mean, you know, that's a key problem right there, right? I mean, you took the debates as an example. Well, that's different because that's like news, so that's more ubiquitously available without.
Okay, I'll give you one. Literally Sunday, this Sunday, 5 days ago, I wanted to find a movie. Okay, the movie was called Forgetting Sarah Marshall. Okay, I thought I had it in my catalog. I mean, no one owns DVDs. I thought I had it in my DVR somewhere. I didn't. I didn't have it anywhere. And so I did a global universal search using the Video Genome Project, and I found that it was not available on any service that I had like right then. Rights issue, right? So I'm like, oh, that totally sucks because I feel like watching it. But then I also found that it was actually like on like TBS on Monday at 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. So I'm like, all right, not bad. So I hit a button, DVR'd, and you know what? Okay, I didn't get to watch it on Sunday, but I'm gonna watch it maybe tonight. I'll let you guys know how it is. So I mean, the point is, yeah, I could have been like, oh, I should subscribe to Netflix. I mean, I have Netflix, but you know, I should get it on Vudu. But I think that millennials are a lot like me. They're very cheap, and and if they can, they'll find ways around. But maybe they do 4 searches in a row, and they go, man, this thing is continuing to tell me that I just paid for Netflix every month if I can watch 4 movies. I think that's kind of what's going to happen. If you have a tool or a technology or a service provider that see right now Google is just kind of it's just sitting there. But imagine you had a service provider that kind of nudged you a little bit, right, and said, hey, we noticed the last 14 titles that you curated. Did you know that 8 of them you could have got if you just paid $9.99 a month for this? It actually is a pretty good deal. Or did you know that of the last 14, what are you doing buying it on Vudu or buying it on Apple TV? Did you know you could have just allocated your DVR programming in such a way over the next 4 days where you can get 80% of them for free? That's by the way, that tech exists, just no one's doing it yet.
And Judy, just to change the topic a little bit here, one of the big differences between traditional linear video and over-the-top video is the potential for interactivity. So what do you see as the promise of interactivity or social integration, or what are the things that could be done with over-the-top video that take advantage of that interactivity that could potentially either be differentiators or add value to the over-the-top experience?
So for the past 3 years, we have done more projects with interactivity. Second screen experiences are interacting with content because you're on your devices that can interact because the technologies are there. They're available. I'm going to be 100% upfront. I consider none of these to have been a successful project because they're not correct in the way that they were done. One of them would be presenting while you're watching something, here's photos from the shoot about it. Here's some fun facts, pop-up video style, you want to take a quiz on what you just saw, something so everybody's just throwing interactivity. And I think we have to look and say, when you talk about interactivity, what's the right interactivity for the content that you're looking at to really engage users? When you're watching a drama, the point is not to distract them from what they're doing, to try to interact with something else, but to engage them after the fact, to be able to engage them about the content. If you were doing the next generation American Idol and you didn't have interactivity and online comment and voting, you'd probably be a fool, right? I mean, the technology's there and it makes sense and it could drive people more. So I think it's really about what it is that you're trying to promote, what is it you're trying to do, and what's the right way to interact with the users so that you can mostly keep them engaged, right? Or keep them more engaged or increase their engagement and have a purpose other than just throwing interactivity at them. Because a game in the middle of a show doesn't make sense to a lot of users.
So we did some research on that, of course, right? So, and we found that, especially with second screen, what really worked was none of the things that you described have not been working very well. No extensions of the programming, except in sports, where viewers like to see stats of previous games, for instance, right? So, but what worked for second screen are more moderated tweets, or moderated other types of social network interactions, because viewers that are using second screen or are using another device while they're watching a main screen tend to communicate with that second screen first and foremost. So whether it is accessing social networks or calling friends about it, literally on the phone, or texting more likely, it's an engagement, but it's not an engagement that's calling additional programming. Necessarily.
Interesting. Any questions from the audience? Yes, Mr. Dish. Everyone wants, Jason should be wearing a sign that says Dish.
It's a
I
satellite.
thought you were very close. I wasn't actually trying to argue with you at all, though.
Oh, okay.
I thought it was a light, there were a slight tweak, but it doesn't even matter. I wanted to survey you guys, because I thought Mr. Kochar's example of searching for a particular title was very interesting, and I struggle with this myself, finding, so like if you guys were to pick the movie that you love seeing in the year you graduated from high school.
Is this a tricky way to figure out how old we are? Is that what
Yeah,
you?
really.
He graduated. But pick that, I'm just saying, pick a title, and then tell me how you would figure out tonight what service you could watch it. Because this is something I struggle with myself. Like, literally, what app do you load up to figure that out? You know, is it just Google? Because it doesn't work for me. So I mean, what?
Well, I have a very recent example. I wanted to watch the latest season of Hannibal, which wasn't produced when I was in high school. But I could not find it. I could not figure it out. I did not try, I don't think I tried Googling it, but even then, I didn't think Google would be able to put me in the right place. I think it might have been on Hulu, but even there I didn't see it. So whatever, it just didn't seem to be anywhere. So that was very frustrating. But I first tried, my Comcast Xfinity, then I tried Netflix, and I forget what else after that, but it didn't seem to be available anywhere.
So I'm obsessed with a new show called Night Manager, and
Oh, yeah.
it was a British show originally, obviously, and it came over to the U.S. and I was like, forgot what channel it was on, didn't know what channel it was on, so I Googled, I IMDb'd actually, which is what I typically do. I find out who the show's producer is. It typically tells me what channel is actually showing it, and then I go download the app. And I download the app because I really want to see the show, and it's the only place to find it. And so now AMC has my email, and they're created a very limited experience for me, but it's just fine. Why? Because I can go there. I know when the third episode has been shown. I can go see it immediately.
I'm like you, I think the thing that I get most information from is IMDb. Just recently wanted to watch Secondhand Lines. I know it's a sappy movie, but I love it.
Which one? Which one?
Secondhand Lines.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's sappy, but
Yeah, that's cool.
but had no clue. This is not a recent movie. This is not something that you're going to find on anything. And said, go to IMDb, and it came back, told me Amazon Prime had it, and compared the price. I think Amazon Prime and Vudu had it, but other services didn't. Told me the price of both. I could make a decision right then. I won't say it works 100%, but it's probably the thing that I use most personally to be able to find if I can't find something
So
on it.
IMDb is scraping these APIs
That's my assumption.
They are, yeah. To-
Well, so absolutely no kidding. What you're just describing and what the panelists just said. So the Video Genome Project has been, for 3 years, we've been B2B. We've been providing services to other video distributors with end users. And the thinking was, I had this thought that now that the technology was built, what's the quickest way to get it to end users? Okay, that was the thinking. And so it's actually very hard for those of you who have built or know how to build consumer businesses. User acquisition, especially today, is ridiculously hard, very expensive. So I actually thought the quicker path was to go to folks like you guys, right? Found out that although that's a very positive path, I don't know what the hell I was thinking as far as quicker, because these companies, right. And so we were so dissatisfied that we, like, all kidding aside, and it's just sort of, you walked into this, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to sell or whatever, but like end of this year, the Video Genome Project is actually introducing an application that sits atop, like, basically think of it like a Google, but a highly curated for video, hyper-personalized. Actually, our VCs are calling it like the Waze for video. So I actually don't. So when you say, how do you do it? I actually use my own service, and it is it's fast, effective. It's pretty. I mean, I'm not going to say 100% because I haven't tried all trillion pieces of video out there, but there's never a thing that I don't find. But actually, I think it's more powerful when I kind of know generally how I feel or what I want. You know, I've had a long day, I'm exhausted. We just had we just closed a big deal, we're psyched. And you know the intelligence that occurs in communities, like, you know, when you sit down with your friends and you're like, oh, you know what? My son, their team was like an underdog all year. They made it through the playoffs. They got to the finals, and then they lost the game, and now he's bummed out. You know, and you share that with like a friend. Be like, you know what? You guys should watch Rudy, right? And like the intelligence that goes back and forth, right? But that intelligence exists, just a machine doesn't have it.
Well,
So,
I mean, but I would say, I forgot to mention my other favorite device nowadays is the Amazon Fire device, which I think Amazon has done a superb job, because the experience there is the following. I watch most of the cool news shows, and I'll put my search into Amazon on Fire, and literally it'll pop it up. And what they're doing very smartly now is they have their app ecosystem. So not only am I seeing where it is, but it's also price. So when you talk about price and how we evaluate, I think they're doing a brilliant job, and I think they're really on the forefront in that domain, at least.
Great, we have a question up front here.
There's a massive amount of content going up on mobile platforms. And so a lot of times there are interesting topics, but I couldn't seem to find a crowdsourced curation, either passive or active, to create sort of feedback loops that I could customize. Do you know any algorithms or any systems out there?
Xavier?
I mean, it's just like I promise you, I did not plant these guys in the audience. Okay, let me answer a little more generally, because I'm sure my panelists are hating me right now that I'm promoting VGP so much. Joe said
It's okay.
So what you're talking about, the crowdsource, right? So there's two things. People sometimes confuse crowdsourcing with just collecting intelligence from from collective human intelligence, right? So crowdsourcing is very much, it requires something very active by the crowd. Like they opt in to do something, right? Wikipedia is crowdsourcing, right? And there's a lot of intelligence on Wikipedia. Unfortunately, Wikipedia captures maybe, I think it was like 0.2% of all the collective human intelligence on the World Wide Web, and it's still friggin' amazing, right? So that's sort of crowdsourcing this type of like what to watch and what have you. A company like Google or Amazon, more Google, because Amazon's a little closed platform. What Google has done through technologies like AdSense, for instance, right? They've gone and they've cataloged intelligence with passive to the intelligence itself. So the intelligence doesn't actually have to do anything, right? That second piece, I think that is the future. That is where you're going to get what you're looking for. Because otherwise, you're standing on top of a hill and you're like, hey everybody, what should I watch? And if you're Kardashian, yeah, you're going to have 2 million users say you should watch this. Okay, what I believe you're going to find now, okay, is you're going to find these technologies, these tools that are going to be able to. It's called structuring disparate data sets that are essentially this intelligence. So there's a lot of intelligence, let's say, on Twitter. There's a lot of intelligence on Facebook, but there's a lot of intelligence on IMDb. There's a lot of intelligence on Wikipedia. There's a lot of intelligence on Box Office Guru. There's a lot of intelligence on CNBC's site, right? Here's the problem. You can go to all those sites and you can read them, and you'll gain the intelligence. The human brain is extremely powerful, and we process very fast. Problem is, a machine cannot, unless all of that intelligence is in an apples to apples structure. So it is happening. Absolutely, it is happening, and it's going to happen in the next 2 years that you're going to see essentially an AdSense for video. Okay, you are going to see that. In the interim, you have to rely on, at best, these closed platforms like Amazon Fire, or these blogs, or these fan sites, or what have you. The problem is our tastes are not always so localized, right? If we're into Star Wars, we know we go to the Star Wars fan site. But sometimes we're into Star Wars, and sometimes we're into the debates. So I think you're going to see it. But for now, unfortunately, but if you want to be a beta tester for the Video Genome Project, give me your card.
All right, so we're unfortunately out of time, but please join me in thanking our panelists.